anticlimactic, this 5-second stretch before we actually go on the air. It's like we get 3 seconds on a lot of the other recording. We used to get 3 seconds here, and 3 seconds was just enough time to be like, okay, we're going live. And 5 seconds is enough time to like, okay, we're going live. And
It's
I'm
almost like
waiting, and
it's
I'm
almost like a
waiting.
false start is going to happen.
It is. And like, I wonder, there's going to be a length past 5 seconds where anxiety will surface for most people. Like when you're standing off stage waiting to go on and you have like 10 minutes that you're just standing there waiting. Is it going to be my turn? When's it going to be my turn? When's it going to be my turn? But
Right.
on
Well,
the live
and it's
stream.
kind of like the longer you wait to talk to customers, the more anxious you get about is this actually going to happen? It was like
Or
the
the
more
more
you
anxious you
build and the
should
more
get.
you wait, yeah, the more anxious you feel. I imagine, yeah,
We
because
could say
there's
the
more like sunk costs to the things you've technically been working on it longer, so spending more time, and then likely have been developing the solution. So that's why one of the like core principles for us right at the Attraction Lab is prioritizing shortening time to the customer. And so just as we are shortening hopefully our time, if we could, here on launching, is usually what we're helps us out. So
well, with that, welcome everyone, all y'all, to the Traction Lab weekly AMA stroke office hours, where we answer your questions, whatever you've got in mind. Cameron's going to warm up the chat while I do the little intro here. And we can talk about anything. We could talk about ideas. We can talk about product market fit. We can talk about fundraising. We can talk about traction. We can talk about science. We can talk about TV shows. Whatever you guys want to talk about, we're here for it. We are down for it. You can submit your questions in advance if you want a bit of breathing space to go to jdm.bio, click the calendar, it's a form, you fill it out, send a question in advance. We got not one, not two, but 3 questions that came to us today, so we're going to answer those. But we do prioritize the live questions because y'all are here. You showed up. You showed up in real time. You're not watching the replay. You showed up in real time. So we're going to answer your questions live. And if you got them, smoke them if you got them. Drop them into the chat or the comment section, depending on whether you're watching on YouTube and LinkedIn. And Cameron, how are you? You are not in town.
I am not in town. I am in Las Vegas, not here for as much of the craziness that Vegas brings outside of the craziness of running 26.2. So I spent
That's
the last
insane.
half of yesterday after working to go map out my course. So I always learn that playing ball, you got to check out the field and see things before, and so went up to the top of the mountain and cruised on down. So I'll be starting at 7,500 feet of elevation and going down to 2,000. So it'll be a nice drop over 26 miles.
Wow, wow, wow. Also, it looks like you've got a haircut.
I did. I got that.
Were you just shedding weight for the run?
Just so I streamline. It's kind of like you got to get game ready, and you start getting your mindset, and so.
You get it looking good. You took 3 years off your face with the
Thanks.
hair.
So how old am I? That's always the
You're
question, right?
23, 24.
Exactly. According to my Whoop, I am.
Well, why don't you brag about it?
Just kidding.
My Whoop shames me. I do have a negative, what do they call it? Whoop, the age rate of age or whatever that Whoop calls it. I do have a negative one of those, but I'm not, particularly youthful according to it. And I don't know how those two things are together, but they are, and I get shamed. Deep shame, deep humiliation from the Whoop. Whoop, whoop.
Very good. Very good. Well, thanks
that's
everyone
probably
for.
enough banter, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think it's sufficient banter.
I thought it was first-rate banter right until the end there when it, trailed off. But with that, we'll go ahead and get started with one of the pre-submitted questions. Again, we prioritize the live ones. So while we're doing that, throw it in the chat. It's about a minute delay if you're on LinkedIn anyway. So we'll get started. And here we are. This is...
I
Were you
was
gonna
just
say
saying,
something?
apparently on the comments here, when I ask people questions, I'm coming in as the operations manager for Carlson Center. So I'm not sure why that's the case, but nonetheless, that's me. So
That's not even
interesting,
your job.
good old change in technology here. So it says operations team member at Carlson Center, which I don't even know. The Carlson Center is apparently a person. So um, cool.
Fun.
Very nice. So, Restream throwing us off here one last time. But
Oh well. All right. Well, our first question coming at you, coming at us from a B2B SaaS residential painters doing interior and exterior house painting. They have 24 painting contractors in paid pilots. It's an estimating and job management software. It says they're actively using it, submitting feedback, the whole thing. But I just realized something kind of depressing. Painting contractors are some of the most price-sensitive small business owners I've ever encountered. They're used to competing on price for every job. Their margins are razor thin, and now we're asking them to pay $65 a month for software when they're used to pen and paper that cost nothing. One guy literally told me, I can't charge my customers more to cover software costs, and I can't afford to eat the cost myself. Are we just in a race to the bottom industry where no one can afford to invest in their business? Painters tend to be older, also not technically savvy, and skeptical of newfangled tools. Maybe we picked the wrong trade.
well, it sounds to
Yeah.
me like these aren't one your customers, for one, and that there's not a super urgent or severe pain point is kind of what I'm taking away from what's been shared, right? And so I think the signals that we're seeing, that at least I'm seeing related to that, is I think this is kind of the case that we often see is like, oh, it's the customer's fault, right? They're just not seeing it or things of that nature. And so if there was a big enough pain point where they saw a return on investment each month where they would basically get that $65 a month back, whether that's from them increasing the amount of jobs or the efficiency that it's driving allows them to fit more in one day. But at this point, the perceived value of what they're creating and the like problem that you're solving, they're not connecting that to like why that matters to them in terms of an overall return on that investment. And so it's not really a matter of, I would say, the price. It's more about the promise and the value that you're aiming to demonstrate. And if you take that back in terms of it, even a sequence is, is there truly even that big of a problem worth solving? So, if the pen and paper works for them, that's the solution. And like, we don't want to just fit technology on to fit technology. Just because it has to ultimately solve a particular problem. But that's my first take. What about you, JDM?
Yeah, this seems like a nice to have. I think that's the signal that you're getting from your customers, is that this is a nice to have. I am, however, curious about the paid pilots. So you have 24 contractors in paid pilots. So what is the issue here? It says they're used to competing on price, and so they can't pay, and now we're asking them to pay $65 per month, and they don't really wanna, but 24 of them did. So what makes those 24 different than the rest? That's my big question. If there's nothing that really separates those two apart, or maybe your 24 paid pilots were at $1 or something that was, fairly nominal, so it doesn't really give us a signal of anything, and they're just paid pilots in air quotes, then okay, there's probably nothing there. But otherwise, they're paying and others aren't wanting to pay. So let's figure out what makes those 24 different. And let's see if we can target the 24. Can that 24 be a representative example of the wedge that we could use to get into the market? That's my thing. I want to know about those 24.
Yeah, no, great points.
Cool.
What? Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Oh, did you want to? You have more to say?
No, I
Or?
was just gonna say, like, yeah, like what, like if they were to set that up as kind of a, and maybe you kind of hit on it, but was a little bit of an experiment. Like, how would you recommend they do that? Is that going and doing more discovery with them, or like how would you parse apart like finding the difference between those 24 and the other?
Yeah, if we assume for a second that they're paying a real value, not just like a nominal fee for this,
Mm-hmm.
and so we really do want to find the difference between these groups of people, then what I would do is first start with what I know. what do I know about each of these companies, about the size of them? We can go through all the demographics and firmographics, right? And say, let's just start creating personas for these 24 people and just start literally piling in everything that we possibly can, and then start going with all the people who are telling us no and doing the same thing. And then seeing if we can do, in our head at least, some like cluster analysis and start to see like, what is it that looks like on paper these 24 people tend to have in common. It does not need to be 24 out of 24, but what do the bulk of them have in common? And what that it's different than what the non-24, the other group of people, have in common. So that would be the first thing that I would do. And I know that's not an experiment, because the first thing is like, let's form an hypothesis around this.
Right.
So if we could do this, assuming that we can do that, which I don't know why we wouldn't be able to do that with at least some of the data that we have. Once we do that, then we can run the experiment. And the experiment that I would run is and say, okay, can I find more like the 24? And can I expect them to convert at a rate that is reasonable? So if we're right that this set of reasons that makes this 24 different than the others is the reason that they are willing to put money on this and the others aren't, then we can test that by getting in front of more people who look like a 24. And then when we get that data back, we have a larger sample size. Okay, these people said no, these people said yes. And maybe it started out with 3 out of 10 are converting, and now it's 6 out of 10 are converting. So it makes the 6 different than the 4. And we just keep going through that process until we're able to predictably, reliably get in front of customers and convert them. There's a separate thing that has to do with like the math that I would probably also want to do is like, what does this mean in terms of the size of the market and our ability to scale? Can we make this into an interesting business, or is this fundamentally small? But that is how I'm thinking about it. Is like, let's do some head work first. Even like if you just list out everything you possibly can, or you just have a bunch of notes, chuck them at your favorite AI intern and have it tell you what those 24 have in common that are not found in the others. That'll work too. So just come up with an hypothesis. There are no facts inside the building, but there are sure as shit hypotheses. So let's get to one of those so that we can then get in front of those people and see if that hypothesis is validated or not. That would be the experiment. What about you? Do you think same way?
No. Yeah, no, I think that the same line of it, and so appreciate you laying that out for all of those here.
Awesome. Cool beans. All right. Welcome if you're just joining us live.
Where does cool beans come from?
Cool. That sounds like something you're going to have to talk about on the Traction Lab podcast.
Beans.
Cool beans.
Right.
Cool beans.
Beans.
It's an older thing. It feels 60s or 70s would be my guess. It's got that vibe to it. But while Cameron does some very critical research for us, I will go ahead and read our next question. And if you've got a live question, drive it in the chat. We prioritize the live ones. Otherwise, we do go to the ones that were pre-submitted. We always get through those, or almost always get through the ones that are pre-submitted. So if you need a little bit more breathing room, then you can go to jdm.bio, click the calendar, and then fill out the little form. Submit your question in advance. If you're watching the replay of this, it's in the show notes. Okay, cool. Let's do it. This is B2B SaaS for independent film producers working on documentaries and indie features. They're at the idea stage. Okay, cool. I'm a documentary producer, worked on like 8 films over 10 years. Production management software for indie films is either overkill enterprise stuff like Movie Magic or doesn't exist. I want to build something specifically for indie producers managing budgets, schedules, crew, locations, all the chaos. But here's my hesitation. Film production is so project-based. A producer might work on one film every 18 months. They need the software intensely during production, 3 to 6 months, then not at all for over a year. How do you price that? Monthly subscriptions feel wrong. Per project pricing feels right, but gives us wildly inconsistent revenue. Am I overthinking this, or is the business model fundamentally broken? Also, indie producers are notoriously broke. We secure funding for films, but never have money for ourselves. First thoughts, Cameron?
Yeah, so I mean, we get this a lot about kind of reality things. This is how I would put it, or where there may be less frequent use cases across a year, and so there's ways to level that out. Obviously, putting it on like an annual basis and setting it up maybe in a tiered system. So if it's like, hey, on average they have 3 jobs, or something that they're going to be, or films are going to be working on, instead of it being per month, do you set it up as like a tiered system? So it's like your middle tier, you get access to 2, whereas your premium tier, you get 3+, and so it kind of helps them gauge where they're going to be dialing that in. I think to the question around the pricing and having money. Again, if they're truly an early adopter, they're going to have that urgent and severe pain point, and they're going to put it into their budget of resources, because there's ultimately going to be something that they unlock, right? And I think oftentimes we're like, the way I'm hearing this come in is like, okay, this is just purely a cost to them, versus like, this is an investment of resources to get some sort of value. And what is that value they're getting in terms of unlocking? And so another way to look at it is quantifying the pain. So their inability to do X, what is that costing them? And so, oftentimes people jump to time, but then it's like, so what? Like, why? What does the time, opening up their time, unlock? Does that allow them to get more funding for a next film, right? Or does that allow them to have better films that produce on a greater scale? Or like, what is it that ultimately those resources will unlock? And so it's not simply of like, here's the pain point we're solving, but also, when you solve that problem, how is their life better? And then what is the quantifiable way that they're going to look at it in their brain? Because at the end of the day, it is a dollars and cents investment, with some obviously social and emotional drivers as well. But we need to understand what the nuance of that is, of how their life is better. So, things such as risk reduction. Does it reduce risk of them articulating to their investors of how use of funds were going and why this is a awesome film? Or is it going to open up their time to spend more time in marketing the film, so then they have a better launch to the film going forward, right? And so I think articulating the pain point, quantifying it, and then looking at price as a signal of their investment to get to that future state.
Couldn't agree more with those points. I think one thing to bring into it as like the metaphor that we often use, and it comes from, I think, Clayton Christensen, is the idea of jobs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that people don't buy products for features. They hire products. Gesundheit.
Did I mute
They
in time or
hire.
not?
You did not. You muted like halfway through the sneeze that we just got.
I
Like,
was trying to
it was
find
a very like angry German sneeze was what we got. It was it was a lot of fun. I actually didn't know that you muted, and I just thought that you had a very aggressive sneeze today. Something about the Vegas air.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, jobs to be done. So people don't buy products for features. They hire products to get a job done for them. And that's a fundamental shift in the way that we think about things. And I think it's really applicable here, because you can think about it like hiring anybody else. You don't hire somebody just because you sort of kind of want to make your life easier, or it makes it like nice. You hire a person in order to fulfill a role, so that you can either scale or take something off your plate so that you can do something else. It's always the so that that's part of this decision, not purely because you don't like it. Even if it's something you don't like, you don't like it because there's a replacement. There's something else you want to plug into that hole in your life, even if it's just a hobby or spending more time with the kids or whatever. There's something that you want to plug that hole with. And in order to do that, you have to create the hole by hiring someone else. So we're hiring a product to get a job done for us. And so when you think about this particular product, and you think about pricing, and you think about, how does this fit into budgets and everything else, think about it like hiring like you would a person. And I think that will start to clarify certain things, that it's that kind of decision. The other thing, I like the outcome idea, so I'll just continue with the metaphor concept, is that I'm blanking on who it was, but I think it was like a marketing professor at Harvard Business School said that, nobody buys a 1/4-inch drill bit. They're buying a 1/4-inch hole. And so like that's what we mean when we're talking about like shifting to outcomes, is that what people wanted was the 1/4-inch hole, and they had to buy a drill bit in order to get it. But what they wanted was the hole. They're buying the hole.
Yeah, so I know the example is actually the use case for 3M. So the sticky things, and so like to take that example further, was actually what the outcome they're trying to do is hang a piece of art, right? They want to beautify their space, and the outcome is not necessarily even simply just even putting a hole in the wall. It's they want to be able to hang a piece of painting, and so the solution, as long as it ultimately gets to that outcome of them beautifying their space. And so, yeah, you could use a 3-inch drill bit, or you could use these sticky things. Obviously, they come with other risks and rewards related to that, where like maybe there's peace of mind with a piece of metal in the wall versus a stickum on the wall. So, but yeah, no,
Let's
that's
stick
great.
them. And we often use this framework. We don't really have a name for it. We need a fun Traction Labby name for it, but it's a 3-step process for going from feature to outcome. And so for those of you who've been with us a while, you've probably heard us talk about this before, but the idea is you go from feature and you say, okay, well, so what, right? And this is going from, okay, it's a drill bit that's a 1/4 inch wide. Why? So what? Well, we need a 1/4 inch hole. Okay. And then the next step is, and who cares? Like, why are we doing that? Why is that important? And well, it's because I want to hang a piece of art. Right. And so like going through that multi-step process is how we get not just to the outcome of the thing, but the goal that they're trying to achieve, because that goal is why they're actually paying money. And so if you can't get people to pay money for it, it could be that they're just not connecting those two things together, not buying a drill bit because they're thinking about how do I hang a painting. So they're not Googling drill bits, they're Googling how do I hang a painting. So it could be a disconnect there. So that's an easy thing to try. You just correct that. But it also could be that you're just not even tapping into the right goal. It's not a big important thing right now. Like I just moved into my house. I didn't. I'm just using this as a example. Moving in my house. I need to hang some art, but right now I'm trying to figure out how to get my refrigerator. Okay, like that's the big thing is I want my refrigerator, my furniture in there. I'm going to worry about the, painting another day. And so we're just not even tapping into the right thing because it's not problem 1, 2, or 3 on the list.
Yep.
So hopefully those 2 frameworks, jobs to be done and are as yet to be named multi-step process for going from feature to outcome, will help you kind of reframe that a little bit. We did get a question in the chat, but
perfect. Let's do it.
No, I was just going to say, so let's give our last thoughts on this, and then we will tackle the question from the anonymous attendee in the chat.
No, I think we sufficiently. I was just going to play around with a name, but I think we can do that on our own time.
Well, now I'm kind of curious. Now we just got this thing hanging out there. All right, well, guys, you'll have to tune in next week for Cameron's great naming ideas. All right, you want to go ahead and read this one?
Sure. So thank you for hopping in and asking the question. I'm going to see just if it has a name to it. So give me 1 second. It doesn't give us a name on the back end.
There's some type
Anson.
of
What's up, Anson?
Good security thing.
Yeah.
When you in your profile somewhere on LinkedIn that won't share your name with third-party integrations, and since we do this in Restream because we're going to LinkedIn and YouTube, on sometimes a minority of the time you just come in as LinkedIn user, and so that Cameron was hunting on LinkedIn the actual comments to see the real name there. So cool. Welcome.
So this is so Anson, he just won our recent hackathon last weekend. So this is the question that he's sharing. So we'll be continuing on with the venture. So currently working on developing a new medtech solution. He spent significant amount of time validating the market and have found a clear clinical need. But as a younger founder, the gap between a validated idea and actual medical product feels massive, especially regarding regulations and building trust with big institutions. I'd love to get your take on how to bridge these gaps effectively. So I'll pass it to you, Jay Doom, and I'll follow up anything you got.
The first thing I'll do is just validate what you're feeling. It is massive. It's big. And there's just no way around that. And it's not because that you're a young founder, although I suppose that maybe doesn't help just in terms of understanding what all the steps are. But for anybody, the gap between this idea and getting a medical device in the market itself and making money off of that is actually a really big gap. So first thing I'm gonna do is just validate that. It's not in your head. You ain't crazy. It do be like that sometimes. I'm not familiar with this here. Maybe Cameron, you can fill in the details. But the schedule of how the device is classed, the different classes of devices that get different levels of FDA clearance. And so knowing that is helpful to figuring out exactly the size of the gap. We might be talking about something that's super small, or we might be talking about something that's implanted surgically in the human body, which is a pretty big gap that we're gonna have there. There's a lot of extra steps for that. So there's a lot that I think is necessary for that. I think a couple things come to mind though that are more general. So one is to get some advisors in this space. And the easiest way to start with something like that is advisors who are clinicians, probably faculty, either at Sac State or UC Davis. Got some great sources on both of those that have some expertise in this. That's going to get not only some credibility and a lot of little details about how these things sort of happen. Then you can get some advisors who are medtech founders. We know some in our network that have had successful exits in that space. There are plenty of people out there. You might be able to find one that's a little bit closer to what you're working on. But they are going to also understand what that journey is like, and they're going to be able to provide you with some really solid guidance on how that worked out for them. The benefit, I suppose, of being in a well-regulated space is that the regulatory steps then become clear. We don't know them at the outset, but the path is kind of the same. And that's also the benefit downside for a lot of deep tech stuff, particularly med tech, is that there is this long process before you can even get to market, and it's expensive, and it's nothing like the quick validation that Cameron and I are talking about with B2B software. That's the shitty part. But the awesome part is that also that gives you some license and a playbook for how you would end up getting that to market. It's a completely different playbook than what we use with B2B SaaS. But there is a playbook for how you do this. That's to do with, depending on the particular class of device and how it's used and so forth, it's going to be strategic advisors or strategic investors, and it's going to be distribution partners, and it's going to be maybe somebody to help on the regulatory side. You might actually have some clinical trial partners and site partners who are going to do things like that, or you might be publishing with CROs or something. But there's going to be these things that you connect with together. So get some people is my advice. Get some people around you who understand this process and absorb everything that they got.
Yeah, so for maybe some context for you, and obviously it's hard to bring in that because we can't have them on screen currently, but creating a device or a system for note taking for nurses to help streamline the process of going from basically having conversations with patients and then having that into a particular type of note taking that's done, which is called SOAP notes. So it drives efficiencies and aims to relieve some of the burnout of them having to do that in other cases. So it's not necessarily a device they're using on patients in the sense of surgery or something of that sort, but in those communications. So they kind of have a differentiation.
Got it. Okay.
Through some HIPAA regulations and other things that they're navigating. So there's obviously hurdles, more probably compliance hurdles of navigating the hospital systems. But I think you're dead on in terms of, advisors add that credibility, additionally open up channels and other things and feedback based on kind of the direction that you're going, particularly say as a younger founder. I think that, that can be a perceived barrier, but also, there might be opportunities to, as you kind of make forward progress, that actually opens up different doors as well. So
one other thing comes to mind, and just Anson, ignore kind of everything I said about the preclinical and clinical evidence because it won't be necessary for this thing. But the general thing stands, but just ignore all those specifics because it sounds like you're not going to really have a regulated device at all. But one other thing comes to mind is that there are several other tools in this space that are in use in clinic right now. One that comes to mind that's sort of tangential to this would be the many integrations that they have with, say, Epic, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a medical record system, EHR. And you can use a voice that just records a clinical conversation between a provider and a patient and automatically generates notes to go into the chart. And there's a lot of organizations that are piloting those right now or have those actually as part of the clinical process. And so you can look at how those products went to market and what their path was for that and how they established some of those partnerships as case studies for, was this just a standard predictable path, or was there something special and unique here that we need to pay attention to? So I'd look at competition.
Cool. So Anson, if you have any follow-up questions, throw them in the chat. Happy to dive in and answer those. But maybe in the meantime, we tackle our final question.
Yes, our final pre-submitted question. Always prioritize the live ones, but you go to jnm.bio, hit the calendar, and if you want a little bit more breathing room than you get in a YouTube or LinkedIn comment, You can submit one there. And so we have our third and final question that was pre-submitted, and it's B2B SaaS for mobile mechanic services fixing cars at people's homes or offices. Sounds messy. They are at 328,000 in ARR. Well done. 145 mobile mechanics are subscribed, and here's what's keeping me up lately. Mobile mechanics are getting squeezed by two things simultaneously. One, cars are getting more complex with electronics, and they can't fix everything on site anymore. And two, dealerships are offering mobile service now and eating into the market. Our customers are telling us their businesses is getting harder. Some are pivoting to just oil changes and basic maintenance, but that's all they can reliably do. Oh, because that's all they can reliably do. Mobile. If mobile mechanic industry contracts, we contract with it. Should we expand to brick and mortar auto shops as insurance, or double down and help mobile mechanics compete better? 3 customers have closed their mobile businesses and opened traditional shops in the past 6 months. The trend is worrying. You want to take a stab?
Sorry, if you start, I was putting it in the chat and trying to
Got it.
communicate with Anton, so catching up on some of my.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and kick us off there. Okay, so a couple things. So one, I'll just register a little bit of surprise that things are getting more complex with electronics and that can't be fixed on site anymore. I would actually have thought the opposite. So much of it is software oriented that it seems easier to fix those things, and all we're left with are the big things. So I was surprised by that. That doesn't mean anything. I have no expertise in this space, but just wanted to register that little bit of surprise. It sounds like you're in a space where you have a lot of competition, that the business is getting harder, and it's difficult to maintain business in that space. And I want to know more about the signal of customers who were doing mobile mechanic work and are now opening traditional shops. I want to understand that journey. Is that something akin to, I used to run a food truck and now I run a restaurant? Or so like we can expect it as a career path, like there's a trajectory there? Or are they doing it because like, well, I really want to do that, but it didn't work and I'm a mechanic, so what else am I going to do but open a shop? I want to understand that dynamic a little bit more to see, is that a trend? Is that endemic to the type of work, again, akin to like a food truck to a restaurant? Or is it something else entirely? I have a lot of those questions that just kind of surface there. But go ahead, Cameron.
I was just going to say, I think that kind of building on that thread is like, I'm seeing a lot of like speculation, right? There's not a ton of like data points they're using. So if they were, to come in and say, of our 145, 20% of them are making this transition, or like, they had firm data or this overall in the marketplace, there's kind of a lot of speculation I'm feeling related to how they're approaching this market. And kind of like, is it that they're seeing that their sales are plateauing and then they're kind of looking for the rationale versus like, okay, what's that next core component that we need to ultimately do in order to move, say, from the early adopters to, I don't know if that they're fully at the early majority stage, but are they at that stage of like, okay, how do we cross the chasm to some of these larger larger market? But I think for me, they're making a lot of speculation of what is coming up versus like, here's the data that's pointing in this direction, and that's what you're ultimately going to need in order to like make a decision to pivot or persevere, is like set that up as some specific data point versus just, here's the vibes that I have around what's going on in the market.
It's weird. Traction Labs asking for data and experiments. Like, I don't really know what to do with that. We're so vibes based. The vibes aren't good. They should bail.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Sarcasm. That Cameron just played straight. All right. I really don't think I have much more to say about that. That's why I chose to crack a joke. It's not my space, so I can't actually fill in very much in the way of detail, and I just have more questions than answers. But at the same time, you are at substantive ARR, right? You're at 328,000 ARR for 145 mobile detailers. That's a lot. That's what, $100 a month, more than $100 a month you're charging these mobile detailers. So I really want more data around where the problem is and why we're so worried about this, when we're already this far in to revenue. I mean, you haven't say how long you're in business, but still, those are the questions I have for you. So feel free to follow up.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool
Well,
beans.
that's that. We will vamp for a few minutes, so that you can feel free to type in a question if you got another live question. If you guys have an awesome question like Anson had, or if we want a completely different one, that would be fine. You can ask us a shitty question. We're really good at shitty answers, so it's kind of a match made in heaven. That would be totally okay. I'll just say here, I'm surprised by something. So I am drinking. This is not hot coffee. This is cold coffee that I made, and so I have a fellow Aiden coffee maker, and so it's kind of like akin to a drip coffee, but it does a pour over style through the just the mechanics of the device itself, and actually produces a pretty good cup. Honestly, pretty good. Is it as good as a highly anal, obsessive like pour over routine? No, but I can code pretty much anything I want and it'll do it and gets me more than 90% of the way there, which for pushing a button and getting a cup of coffee is actually pretty awesome. I can dial in temperatures and everything else. But one of the things that I decided to play with was they have what they call cold brew. And it's not cold brew, and I'm going to quibble with that term. But what it essentially does is does a really quick flash bloom of the grounds with hot water, because you have to, and then does essentially room temperature water, or whatever temperature the water is it's in the tank, over the course of an hour and a half to 3 hours to drip through to produce a coffee that is room temperature by the end. And then you can just, I just put mine over ice. You can hear it there. And honestly, pretty good. Like, it's not, is it the best cold brew I've ever had? It is not, but it's actually pretty good iced coffee. And I'm surprised by that. So I think I have, I mean, the hour and a half does suck having to wait an hour and a half for a cup of coffee, but I figure I can make like a bunch of it and put it in the refrigerator. So
there you go. So out of like on your conviction scale, what would you score it?
Well, I'm in my office, which means my options are really limited. So if I want cold coffee, it's 10 out of 10 because it's the only option. But if we can bring in the other competition that's here, which is me actually going to a coffee shop, I would choose. Actually, I'm gonna walk that back. This is better than Starbucks cold brew. So like, there's that. Partially just because I have far superior beans to what you would get at Starbucks. So like, there's that. Yeah, but there's like, if I were to go to
banana co-ferment.
This is not a banana co-ferment. No, this here. What did I actually have? This one here, I believe, is a Columbia from Reprise Roasters in Washington, which is good. But like, if I would go to World Traveler, or maybe like Temple has a good cold brew as well, or Old Soul, like any of those places, I'm gonna get like a pretty good cold brew, and it's gonna be better than this. Not by leaps and bounds though, but like in the same category, but it's gonna be better. So if I want to go sit someplace, like if I wanted to go like take this and sit outside the building here, I'd probably just go to a coffee shop. But if I just want kind of on demand, like here, like, yeah, I'm gonna give it 8 out of 10. I'm in.
Cool. That's pretty good for a coffee snob. So
I mean, like I can dial in. I haven't even experimented with this at all. And what I need to do is, and y'all in listener land might appreciate this. Some of you appreciate this. What I need to do is start tracking all of the brews that I do, so that I can start dialing in all of the details. And now, one of the things I have is I have an AI bot, an AI agent that I've created that manages my wine tastings for me. So that when I have a glass of wine, I chat usually through voice, but I can text it too on my phone with this AI agent, so that it learns from my preferences. It creates the tasting note for me. It manages what's in my cellar, which is just a wine fridge, but like it manages all that for me. And that way, I can have this like actually really fun conversation with not someone who's like a sommelier, because I actually, I've named this agent after a Muppet, as one does. And but I can have this like great conversation that sort of teases out more things over time, and it creates a really good experience. But also, it's just learning in the background about what I like, and so like I can go to the store and like look at a wine and say, hey, what do you think about this? And because it knows things about me, it's going to say, hey, it's similar to this. It's like that you really liked it. It's going to have some of these notes from this other one that you really didn't like as much. And it's going to talk about QPR, and it's going to all that. I needed to create an agent for my coffee. That's what's next for me.
There you go. Well, maybe you can report back in a couple of office hours from here.
Yeah, definitely give me some time to dial that in. But if I have a few extra minutes, which is all it'll probably really take to get started, then I'm gonna create that agent. But what I need from you guys is, which Muppet am I gonna name my coffee agent after? I don't know. I need a Muppet that I'm gonna name it after. So let me know in the comments what Muppet makes sense for coffee, and I'm gonna do that. I think we've amped long enough there for anybody where those listening on the podcast feed have probably just completely tuned out. Either that or like trapped on the elliptical or in their car and don't have access to the fast forward button. They're just, suffering through the hell-like torture of hearing me talk about coffee for a while.
All
Apologies.
good. All good. Well, very good. So, I think I'm not seeing any more questions come through, but thanks for those that pre-submitted them. We appreciate that. Additionally, thank you, Anson, for your questions live. Definitely congrats on winning the hackathon, and looking forward to working with you further on Viridian, or the name change to be named, since he got some feedback that Viridian was too cool of a name for the CIOs, which is kind of his target economic buyer. They like lame names, he said. So we'll come up with some lame names.
So Cameron, did you ever see the TV show Better Off Ted?
No.
It was on, I think, maybe one season or something like that, and it was a great satire of corporate America. Really fun, really ridiculous, well written. It was a great little show. And the company, the evil company that everybody works at there, is called Viridian Dynamics. And so for that reason as well, maybe not the best name for that either. But that's what comes to mind of Viridian. That they had a commercial role. One of their shticks was because it was on network television, they had commercial breaks. And so I never saw it on network TV. I saw it on streaming long after it went off the air. But they would end the commercial block with a fake commercial for Viridian Dynamics. And so they would just end that there. And they would be these like B-roll heavy commercials that we see all the time for corporate stuff, but with a deeply problematic message at its core. But you wouldn't necessarily notice that you weren't in a real commercial anymore until you got too late, which I thought was super funny. Very clever. Anyway, Better Off Ted, free recommendation for y'all. I think you can stream it somewhere.
I looked it up. Yeah, it's on. You can. It's was a 2009 show.
Yeah, older than I thought, and I didn't see it when it was on, so I saw it on streaming like a normal person. Cool. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap a little early today. Quiet in the comments, and that's totally fine. Anson brought an awesome question. You guys submitted awesome questions in advance, so that's great. Again, every Friday noon, YouTube and LinkedIn, we are live here to answer whatever questions you have. Come hang with us, join live. If it's something where we want to start maybe bringing people on to ask live questions, we do have the ability to do that. There's a little logistic thing we have to work through, but if that's something you're interested in, let us know. If you want to submit a question in advance, go to jdm.bio, hit the calendar button. There's a link that you can use to fill out a little Google form. That's it. It's just a Google form that gives you a little bit more breathing space, a little more structure to the question. It's anonymous. As you can see, we never give names on here. If you do give something away, we scrub it before it goes on the air, just so that we can shred and be completely cruel and inhumane while still answering your question to the delight of the rest of our viewers and listeners. And you can always catch the replay in the Traction Lab podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts.
Cool. I like it.
Cool. Cameron,
cool
thanks.
Beans.
Good luck tomorrow on your
Thank you.
run. Cool
Yeah.
beans. Did you find an answer, by the way? You're going to save that for next week?
I'll save it for next week because I need to do a little more research. It was a pretty high level answer. So,
Cool. Well, I look forward to that.
all right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thanks, JDM, for fun as always. And we'll see you next week for our Startup Office Hours live on Friday. And tune into the podcast that drops tomorrow. So, with that, we'll exit as usual with a good old bye.